Here's an experiment you can try. Just take your golf club, maybe turn it upside down, put your arm like this, maybe more of an overhand, then a side arm, then an underhand. If you're like me, I'll bet you feel a very different action in your shoulder blade. Guess what? That's got huge implications to the golf swing. In today's video, we're going to talk with Dr. Tyler Standifird, and he's going to help you understand how the shoulder blade motion is critical to make sure that your right arm gets supported the proper way so that you have powerful, crisp action to drive better ball striking. Tyler, I see this all the time when we do lessons. We'll see a person that will come in and there's their takeaway move right there. That's a really bad position to be in.
Yeah, I
right?
mean, you play enough golf and you look at the way people do it on the golf course or in these places. Frankly, it's something I struggle with in my own game as well, which is that really early rotation of the shoulder, the really early kind of activation of the arms to try and create this depth with the golf swing, which is just a killer to be able to actually do it at the right time in the golf swing.
So let's take a look at a pro video. We've got a couple of swings of Rory McIlroy. Let's look at that in some detail and see when he does the rotation of the arms. So Tyler, just describe to me what he's doing right here on the down the line with this initial takeaway.
Yeah, what I love to see on this takeaway, if I focus on that trail arm, notice that he's not doing any kind of supination or palms up with that trail arm and hand. He's not doing any kind of external rotation yet. And what happens then is you can see that you get that club that's above that swing plane, and it's not until that transition that you'll see that nice external rotation of the shoulder and gets that club to just drop really nicely onto that swing plane coming into the ball.
So as I look at the center of mass of the club, I mean, it's just spot on to the address plane that he had at the onset. Okay, so if I look at the shaft position, like right here, okay, and now look at it through the transition, you see that it is lower and shallower.
Yep.
Okay.
And again, that's coming from the right timing of that external rotation of the trail shoulder.
Okay, so here let's look at it from the backside, right? So there's the lift. Now where is this happening?
Yeah, you see right there as he begins that transition, you see this really awesome shift of that trail arm, which is doing two things. It's externally rotating and it's adducting, or getting a little bit closer to the body. And you can actually see, in order to do that, that scapula or shoulder blade is actually going to kind of shift and almost get pinned a little bit closer to his vertebral column. And that's that movement that you need the scapula to do in order to cause those two actions of external rotation and adduction, which are the big shallowing moves of the club.
So right here, my scapula should be closer, more. There's more distance from the spine from the scapula there versus there. It's come down and in.
Yep.
And so look at that elbow position from there to there.
Yep. And then now he can finish his swing. Once he's done this here, then you can get those really powerful moves of really kind of utilizing the shoulders and arms to really generate some swing speed. As now he finishes the swing, that trail arm the scapula and shoulder are gonna move out and away, whereas the lead arm is kind of gonna move back and in. They almost kind of replace positions.
So if I look at this left arm motion right here, right, as we come through, you're saying that that's the external rotation.
Yep.
And the scapula on the lead side right there is basically doing the same thing that the trail side did right there.
Yep, they're mirroring each other, right? You got to do external rotation and get that scapula in on the trail arm in the backswing, and then you're going to flip-flop those. And on the downswing and into that follow-through, that's when you're going to get the lead arm doing those things.
All right, so from the down the line perspective, you can see that you can really see how that scapula there has come in more into the spine as you've done the follow through, the mirror of the transition.
Yeah, and this is just one of the many reasons that make Rory such an incredible player and ball striker. Yeah, and so I have the benefit, right, of teaching classes related to musculoskeletal anatomy and biomechanics and movement. And I think what's important to understand is the anatomy of these joints. So here at the elbow, this is what we call a hinge joint. meaning this joint can only move in one plane of motion, just flexion and extension. So when we talk about and look at these great videos of the best players who you see some movements of that elbow that tends to have some really great shallowing moves, that can't actually come from the elbow. It has to come up here from the shoulder and the scapula or the shoulder blade. And so what we're trying to do is when they get up to this position here, this is where I'm trying to take that humerus, okay, here, and I'm trying to create this external rotation, okay? Now, luckily, my colleague here doesn't have any muscles to inhibit that range of motion, so we get excellent range of motion here. But this is what we're trying to do. And when we do that external rotation and a little bit of adduction, right, external rotation and a shifting of that humerus down towards the thoracic cage, what this scapular shoulder blade has to do here is it's going to create what we call a little bit of downward rotation and retraction, which is that scapula and shoulder blade moving a little bit closer to the spinal column in order to get that movement.
Okay, so when I'm going like this at the top of my swing, I can feel compression in towards my spine, right? So if we turn this little friend around here, right, so this physically then glides along the ribs, right?
Yep, exactly. And what this is this is showing all the muscles that are attached here. So when we talk about the muscles that actually cause that movement of external rotation and adduction, what's nice is that a lot of those muscles that cause external rotation actually do adduction as well. And so on the back here, we have things like the posterior deltoid, the teres minor, the infraspinatus. These are all muscles that are actually going to create a really nice external rotation and adduction, or moving that humerus a little bit closer to the thoracic cage. And then what we can do is we can activate these muscles on the midline here. So think trapezius, rhomboids, to really kind of pull this scapula in and kind of pin it more towards that vertebral column.
So that's this.
Exactly. That's
right?
coming up here and
so I have this rotation, and then I feel it come into my spine. There's a series. It's not just a single muscle. Then we have an array of muscles that are all letting this shoulder motion happen in conjunction with my blade. So I can feel that blade compress in.
Yep. And I in my classes I refer to this as scapulohumeral rhythm, which is how the scapula and shoulder blade are working in rhythm with the humerus to create these motions. Those two things are always working in conjunction with each other.
Okay. Now, when does it happen on the swing, right? So I can do this motion, like, right, there's my motion, and that's the wrong time, right? It's not on the takeaway, right? So this should be happening, again, just to reiterate, when do I do this motion?
Yeah, exactly. And that's going to be after we come here and begin that transition at the very top of the swing, because the problem is we have limited range of motion in those things. And so a lot of our amateur golfers, what they do, as Dwayne's describing, is they're trying to do that external rotation and pinning of the scapula early in the swing. Well, the problem is what I've done is I've pinned everything down. I've done all that external rotation. I hit the end ranges of my range of motion of these movements, and I get to that point where I actually really need to do it. And the problem is I have no ability to do that any longer because I can't actually move that way. And so I actually would rather a golfer feel this idea of that trail arm doing some internal rotation and maybe some pronation at the forearm, almost as a way to kind of cheat the system and make sure I don't have this, rip the club to the inside on the takeaway, so that I have some room to do that in transition.
Okay. So let's try to recreate what we saw there with Rory McIlroy in a little bit of slow motion. So the fault that we see all the time, and I think this is easy for anybody to succumb to. I see the club, if this is my down the line, I know the club is going to get over here, right? So in my brain, and I'm sure you see this all the time, my brain thinks, okay, let me get this arm going this way, right? So that puts, from now the down the line video, the club head is already inside the hands. And as I'm doing that, there's my rotation. And like that. Right?
Yeah, and we're already limited in the ability of that joint to do that kind of range of motion. And so when we do it super early on, it limits our ability to do it after. And I think this is where golfers really have to understand that the other way to get that club to go behind you is to utilize the trunk, to fire the obliques, and to really utilize those muscles to create that movement to get that club behind you.
Okay, so this is an eye-opening exercise that I've done, right? instead of thinking about my arms going behind my body, let's just take my lead arm here, I just lift the club, basically here's without rotation here, I'm just going to lift the club with my lead arm in front of my right shoulder. Now I'll put my right arm there. Now if I use my oblique, like lo and behold, so from the body's perspective, the takeaway and the initial motion is not behind me.
Yeah, it's almost like it's in front of you, and then it's the turn. And what I love, can you get in that position again? Because I love to point out something when you do this, right? What we've actually done is, because we've utilized those obliques to rotate the trunk, notice he still has a lot of good range of motion here to create that external rotation at the shoulder, to get those scapulas moving towards that vertebral column, right? Whereas golfers who do it the opposite way are not going to have that ability to do that in transition.
So as we look at swings from a down the line perspective, I need my shaft as I've finished my shift to lead foot, right? And I've hopefully maintained my posture of my spine. I need that shaft to be pointing basically to the ball, right? So if I've got this more like in front of me like this, so that's outside the ball, or that's above that plane, right? Now, like there we go.
Yeah, exactly.
And now all I have to do, I just rotate in a nice circle around what I've set my spine posture to be.
And the nice thing is you've put yourself in a position where you're just ready to fire everything, engage through, utilize the ground, utilize those big strong rotations to generate not only a good shape and swing plane, but also a very fast, powerful swing.
We've got a great program where you can submit your swings to some of our coaches. We'll help walk you through the process for the key things you need to be aware of, give you drills and feedback to helping your swing. Just go to the link in the description below or click on the iCard here and you'll get a 7-day free trial.